Well, this is it. Linda asked me, was I nervous? Can you hear me okay? Yeah. I preached at the funeral one time, and I ain't a preacher, and they couldn't hear me. I've got to turn the microphone on. Y'all got it okay? Can you hear me okay? All right. And Jane says when it's time to quit, she'll shut her book and we can all be done then. When, first of all, I am thankful, and I think everybody here should be, that we have a great pastor and a great pastor's wife. They are a good team, and they have well served here. And I appreciate the opportunity to get to speak. I don't get to do that very often. Because I'm not nervous. Am I nervous? No, I'm not. Okay. And now, what I have been this week, after he asked me to do this, I have been a little nervous, but it's not about me. And I want y'all to bear with me, because as we do a lot of times, we're going to go through this. It's going to be a lot of reading, because, I know that dropped your face, but a lot of reading, because I'm not a preacher. But God thought this was important, and He put it in His Word, and I want to share His Word with you. And what I want you to do today is what you do every week, but I want you to be more intent on it today, because you need to be. And that's to look at it and shine that light on yourself. And let's see what we can do to improve ourselves. And I think when we each improve, our church is improved. Our walk with the Lord is improved. We've got a lot of I know in my case, I have a lot of room for improvement. So, again, I'm not a preacher, so we're just going to bear with me today, and you're going to get this. I want you to turn to 1 Eli. Now, you're going to say there ain't no book of Eli, first or second. So, let's turn to the book that talks about Eli, and that's 1 Samuel. And we're going to read a little bit, and I think if I made me an outline, it's probably no good, because I don't usually follow them. But we're going to learn about 3 things I want you to look at. And when I first started looking at this, God just sort of does what He did a lot of times to me. He just backs up a dump truck and dumps a whole bunch. And so then as the week progressed, He gives me a little bit to take from that. And if you haven't, let me just ask you this. Raise your hand if you've read 1 Samuel. If you have read 1 Samuel. It is a great book. You need to, sometime this week, stop and read 1 Samuel. Just the first 5 chapters are awesome. And God's got a big message there. He's got a lot of messages there. And I sort of looked at this and worried about it a little bit. And finally, He gave me this. The good, the bad, and the ugly. And we're going to look at the good, and we're going to look at the bad, and we're going to look at the ugly. And like I said, I'm going to read a lot, so I want you to pay attention, stay awake, and focus in on this. I don't read all that well. Now, there was a certain man of Ramathaim Sophim of Mount Ephraim, and his name was Elkanah, the son of Jeroham, and the son of Elihu, we've heard of him, the son of Tohu, and the son of Zuph. He was an Ephrathite. Well, what's important about being an Ephrathite? He was from Bethlehem. That's what that is. He's from Bethlehem. That's important. Okay, let's read some more. And he had 2 wives. The name of one was Hannah, and the other was Peninnah. And Peninnah had children, but Hannah had no children. And this man went up out of the city yearly to worship and to sacrifice unto the Lord of hosts in Shiloh. Well, this is the feast of the Passover, is what this was. And the 2 sons of Eli, Hophni and Phinehas, the priests of the Lord, were there. Now that seems sort of out of place right there, but we're going to get to that a little later on. And when the time was that Elkanah offered, he gave to Peninnah his wife and to all her sons and her daughters portions. But to Hannah he gave a worthy portion, for he loved Hannah. But the Lord had shut up her womb. And her adversary also provoked her sore, for to make her fret, because the Lord had shut up her womb. And And as he did so year by year, when she went up to the house of the Lord, so she provoked her, therefore she wept and did not eat. Sort of sounds like a bully to me, don't it you? Okay, let's look at this a little more. Then said Elkanah, this is a good husband, said Elkanah to her husband to her, Hannah, why weepest thou? And why eatest thou not? And why is thy heart grieved? Am not I better to thee than 10 sons? So Hannah rose up after they had eaten in Shiloh. This is, they had eaten the Passover. And after they had drunk. And Eli the priest sat upon the seat by the post of the temple of the Lord. And she was in bitterness of soul, and prayed unto the Lord, and wept sore. And she vowed a vow, and said, O Lord of hosts, if thou wilt indeed look upon the affliction of thine handmaid, and remember me, and not forget thine handmaiden, but wilt give unto thine handmaiden a man-child, then I will give him unto the Lord all the days of his life, and there shall no razor come upon his head. And it came to pass, as she continued praying before the Lord, that Eli marked her mouth. What does that mean? He looked at her and he saw her mouth. Now Hannah, she spoke in her heart, only her lips moved, but her voice was not heard. Therefore Eli thought she had been drunken. And Eli said to her, How long wilt thou be drunken? Put away thy wine from thee. And Hannah answered and said, No, my Lord. I am a woman of a sorrowful spirit. I have drunken neither wine nor strong drink. I have poured out my soul before the Lord. Count not thy handmaid for a daughter of Belial. For out of the abundance of my complaint and grief have I spoken hitherto. Then Eli answered and said, Go in peace, and the God of Israel grant thee the petition that thou hast asked of him. And she said, Let thine handmaid find grace in thy sight. So the woman went her way and did eat, and her countenance was no more sad. Now, let's stop right here for just a second. How many of you have sometime in your life been where Hannah was at? I see them hands. Nagged, put down, you ain't this and you ain't that. You ain't worthy of this and you're not worthy of that. You can't do it. You're small. You're little. Down, down, down. This was the way Hannah was. She had an out. She had a way out. I'm calling Hannah the good. I'm calling Hannah the good. And the reason I'm calling her good is because of this. She took her way out. Her way out was, she couldn't do nothing about what her physical things were. She couldn't help that a bit, could she? Only thing she could do was what her faith taught her, was to go to the Lord, to lay out her heart, to lay out her soul before Him and ask for His help. And this is what she did. Now, guess what? The Lord heard. Does the Lord hear our prayers? He does. Do we see it often? Do we see it immediately? We don't sometimes. I know I've prayed that prayer. I've been in that position. And you know, sometimes it took a couple of weeks. It took a couple of weeks for me to see that God had answered my prayer. But look down here in this last part I wrote. When she got up and prayed that prayer, what did she have? She had peace. She had the peace to get up and go on. You know, God put it in her heart to give her that peace, that she knew that her prayer, whatever it was, would be taken care of. Whatever it was, He'd take care of it in a manner that He needed. So let's read on a little bit about Hannah. Now, I've called her the good. We're going to get to the bad and the ugly. And Hannah prayed and said, My heart rejoices. Oh, yeah. Let me tell you where I'm at. I'm in chapter 2, verse 1. And Hannah prayed and said, My heart rejoiceth in the Lord. Mine horn is exalted above the Lord. Now this is after, I forgot to tell you all this, this is after God blessed her and gave her a son, gave her that man-child. And this was Samuel. And you can read about Samuel. This is another whole part of this. Samuel is another intriguing part of this. But we're going to take out the good, the bad, and the ugly. So we're looking at the good. And it's Hannah right now. And it says, My horn is exalted in the Lord. My mouth is enlarged over mine enemies, because I rejoice in thy salvation. In other words, nanny boo-boo, you can't talk about me no more. You know, God has delivered me out of my sorrows. I'm going to read a good little bit here now. There is none holy as the Lord. I agree with that. There is none holy as the Lord, and there is none beside thee. Neither is there any rock like our God. Talk no more, so exceedingly proudly. Let not arrogance come out of thy mouth, for the Lord is a God of knowledge, and by him actions are weighed. The bows of mighty men are broken. They that stumbled and are girded with strength. They that were full have hired themselves out for bread, and they that were hungry ceased. So that the barren hath borne 7, and she hath many children, is waxed feeble. The Lord killeth and maketh alive. He bringeth down to the grave and bringeth up. The Lord maketh poor, and he maketh rich. He bringeth low, and he lifteth up. He raiseth up the poor out of the dust, and he lifteth up the beggar from the dunghill, to set them among princes, and to make them inherit the throne of glory. For the pillars of the earth are the Lord's, and he hath set the whole world upon them. He will keep the feet of his saints. Who's a saint? I hope to be. I hope I'm a saint. Yeah, counted that way. And the wicked shall be silent in darkness, for by strength shall no man prevail. By strength no man's prevail. You ain't going to outstrong somebody. I don't care how strong you are, you ain't going to do it. The adversaries of the Lord shall be broken to pieces. Out of heaven shall he thunder upon them. The Lord shall judge the ends of the earth, and he shall give strength unto his king, and exalt the horn of his anointed. Who's his anointed? Who's his king? Jesus. Jesus is. Okay, now, was Hannah good? I count her for good. I count her for good. Now I'm going to tell you about the bad. Let's look at some bad. And really, I'm going to tell you a little bit about bad, but the main thing is that this first thing here tells you about bad. It says all that you need to know about bad. And verse 12, chapter 2, verse 12. Everybody there? Say amen. Amen. Now the sons of Eli, what was their name? Hophni and Phinehas. Hophni and Phinehas. Now the sons of Eli were sons of Belial. They knew not God. That pretty well says it all, don't it? They're lost. They're evil. My Bible says in the little print down here, it says it calls them wicked men. They're pretty bad. Well, what did they do to make them bad? What did they do to make them bad? Well, we could read down here. Now the sons of Eli were the sons of Belial, and they knew not the Lord. And the priest's custom with the people was that when any man offered sacrifice, the priest servant came with the flesh was in seething, with a flesh hook of 3 teeth in his hand. Y'all done that in your garden, hadn't you? And he stuck it in the pan, or kettle, or cauldron, or pot. All that the flesh hook brought up, the priest took for himself. So they did in Shiloh, unto all the Israelites that came thither. Also, before they burnt the fat, the priest's servants came and said to the man that sacrificed, Give flesh to roast for the priest, for he will not have sodden flesh of thee, but raw. And if any man said to him, Let them not fail to burn the fat presently, and then take as much as thy soul desireth, then he would answer him, Nay, but thou shalt give it me now, and if not, I will take it by force. That ain't nice, is it? That's sort of reinforcing bad, isn't it? I believe these dudes were bad. Wherefore the sin of the young men, listen here, this part's important. Wherefore the sins of the young men was very great before the Lord. And men abhorred the offering of the Lord. In other words, they had made, these two, Hophni and Phinehas, were priests. Eli, their daddy, was the high priest. These two were priests under him. And they dealt every day, especially through this feast of the Passover. They dealt every day with people. So, in doing so, they had made it where people hated to go to church. They hated to go. Have you ever been there? Have you ever been where sometimes some of the church leadership just made it so bad you didn't want to go? That's bad. That's bad. I'd call that bad. Now we've seen the good, we've seen the bad. And I want to tell you about the ugly. This is going to sound like we're going, no, I'm going to tell you some more about the bad. Let's do that. Let's tell you some more about the bad. Let's go down to verse 22, chapter 2, verse 22. It sounds like we're going to Eli. But now Eli was a very old and heard all that his sons did unto all Israel, and how they laid with the women that assembled at the door of the tabernacle of the congregation. And he said to them, why do you do such things? For I hear of your evil dealings with all these people. Nay, my sons, for it is no good report that I hear. You make the Lord's people to transgress. If one man sin against another, the judge shall judge him. But if a man sin against the Lord, who shall entreat for him? Notwithstanding, they hearkened not to the voice of their father, because the Lord would slay them. Now there was big penalties already set up. Now when he talked about, we're going to look at this a little further. These people were called in the line of Aaron. They were called to be priests by God. And God had set this up from a long time ago. And so this was their duties. And what were they doing? They were making a mockery of it, wasn't they? They were making a mockery of it. So there, I would say that reinforced bad. And then we hear the part over here where they're, not only were they stealing from the people that came, but they were having bad relationships with some of the women that came up there. That's double bad. They just keep adding bad to bad. So these dudes were just as the first statement says, they were wicked men. They were sons of Belial. They were sons of the devil. Okay, that's the bad. Y'all agree they were bad? Okay, I heard that. All right, you agree that Hannah was good? Yes. Okay, good. All right, let's look at the ugly now. We're moving right along with this. Y'all gonna get out on time, sort of. And there came a man of God unto Eli, and said unto him, thus saith the Lord. Look at that. It don't say who that man was, does it? Don't call his name. His name wasn't important. He came from the Lord. And he said to Eli, thus saith the Lord, did I plainly appear unto the house of thy father when they were in Egypt at Pharaoh's house? Did he? Yeah, he did. And did I choose him out of all the tribes of Israel to be my priest, to offer upon mine altar? Yeah, he did that. To burn incense, to wear an ephod before me. And did I give unto the house of thy father all the offerings made by fire of the children of Israel? Yeah. And what was that priest's name? You remember? Do you remember? Aaron, that's right. Aaron's sons and all that. And did God set that in place? And they brought him out of Egypt? Yes, he did. Wherefore, verse 29, wherefore kick ye at my sacrifice and at mine offering, which I have commanded in my habitation, and honorest thou sons before me, thy sons before me, to make yourselves fat with the chiefest of all the offerings of Israel, my people? That's pretty bad. Wherefore, verse 30, wherefore the Lord God of Israel saith, I said indeed that thy house and the house of thy father should walk before me forever. But now the Lord saith, be it far from me. For them that honor me I will honor, and they that despise me shall be lightly esteemed. Behold, the days come that I will cut off thine arm and the arm of thy father's house, that there shall not be an old man in thy house. And he goes on. He goes on to tell Eli. Has Eli done ugly? Yeah. Can you see ugly in Eli? And you know what? God saw ugly in Eli. And he saw ugly and bad in Hophni and Phinehas. And God pronounces this for Eli. He says, verse 32, thou shalt see an enemy in thy habitation, in all the wealth which God shall give Israel. And there shall not be an old man in thine house forever. And the man of thine whom I shall cut off from mine altars shall be to consume thine eyes and grieve thy heart. And all the increase of thine house shall die in the flower of their age. And thus shall be a sign unto thee. Thou shalt come upon thy two sons, on Hophni and Phinehas. In one day they shall die, both of them. And I will raise me up a faithful priest. Was Eli faithful? He was faithful. He was faithful to get all the goodies, wasn't he? He was faithful to do that. He was faithful to cover for them two boys that was rotten. He was faithful for that, wasn't he? Was he faithful to the Lord? No. I will raise me up a faithful priest, he says in verse 35, that shall do according to that which is in my heart and in my mind. And I will build him a sure house, and he shall walk before mine anointed forever. And it shall come to pass that every one that's left in thine house shall come and crouch to him for a piece of silver and a morsel of bread, and shall say, put me, I pray thee, into one of the priest offices, that I may eat a piece of bread. Well, we've seen the good. Hannah. We've seen the bad. Hophni and Phinehas. And we've seen the ugly. Eli. Eli did ugly. I don't know if he was ugly, but he did ugly. And later on, if you read on further, he was about 98 years old. And later on, he did go blind, or nearly blind. His eyes couldn't see. Probably had cataracts, something happened. And his story's on in the next few chapters. And I'd encourage you to get your Bible out and to read that. Read what happened to Eli. Read what happened to Hophni and Phinehas, and how the God used all of this to bring forth His word. And what God puts on you, Ajax and Babbo and Common Cleanser and Scour Pad, ain't gonna take it off. But let's look at it this way. I want you to look at the good, the bad, and the ugly. And I want you to turn that to yourself. I said that start with them. Turn that to yourself. See, do you fit in one of them categories? And if you fit in them other two categories, Lord help you. And He will. And He will help you. Here's the thing. Did He help Hannah? Huh? He did. He helped her. Why? He gave her a way out. What was her way out? Her way out was her faith. She had the faith that if she prayed that prayer, she would get an answer. This is her way out. God always gives us a way out. He never fails to give us a way out. No matter what kind of problems that come up in your life, no matter who's sitting back there nagging you and griping at you and fussing at you and not happy, there's happiness that can be in your life. Happiness can be in your life. We can all have it. It's sort of like this will be good to you. It's sort of like Saturn. You know, Saturn this past week lined up with Jupiter, I think. It made the Christmas star, and they really didn't quite line up, did they? It was off just a little bit. Have you ever looked at Saturn? Look, you looked at it the other night. You looked at the stars. Did it look like Saturn? If you didn't know it was Saturn, somebody had told you, you wouldn't have known that's what it was, would you? But if you had just a little bit of telescope, a little bit of magnification, you could have looked up there and you could have saw the rings on Saturn, and you'd have known what it was. It's just a little bit out of your reach. Just a little bit that you can't see. There's so much in this. There's so much in our life. It's just a little bit out of our reach. What gives us that extra reach? What gives us that magnification? Faith. There you go. I'm proud of y'all. Faith. And that faith could have. Let's look at the ugly, the bad. Look at the bad first. Could it have done anything for them boys? Not in their present state, it wouldn't have, would it? I'm gonna tell you, what's any worse than having a pronouncement of being bad in the Bible? There's not much hope for you there, is there? I believe that had these boys had an opportunity, they might could have changed that. They might could have changed that. I don't know that. But then they could have. I think God would have given them a way out, because He said that He would that none should perish, that all would come. How about Eli? Eli was content. Eli was content to sit back there and take the good meat that was coming to him. You know, bring me some of that. Because he done got too fat to go get it. Bring me some of that. Hey, and while you're over there, bring me a glass of that other too. You know, I want some of all of this. He was content. He didn't want to change nothing, did he? So his evil was ugly. I'm sure God looked upon it for ugly. I know He did, because He pronounced the sentence on him, did He not? He pronounced that sentence not only on him, but on those that came after him. He had made a mockery out of the priesthood. He had made a mockery out of it. You know, I debated today whether to come up here or to stand down there, because I ain't worthy to be here. And I know that. But I know this. It ain't me, it's Him. He's worthy. And He said there was none righteous, no, not one. I'm not righteous. I don't have enough righteous ever to stand here. But I can take what He's given me. And I'm sure a lot of you pray for me today to be able to come up and do what we've done. But to share this and to have an opportunity to take His word. And I think this is what men of old did. I think this is what a lot of people did. Because you think about, most of us here can read and write. Some of us, including me, can't read and write so well, but I can read and write enough to get me by. But a lot of those people back in those days couldn't read and write. They didn't have nothing to read. They didn't have a Bible like we have today. They didn't have that. So where could they go? They went to men who would come and tell them. So, I'm going to charge you with this. I'm going to charge you with this. It is a time to quit. She's not folding up. Now we got some more time. I'll look at 2 or 3 more things then. But I want to charge you with this. It's Matthew chapter 28. And what is Matthew chapter 28? Anybody know? Tell me.
Last chapter.
Yes, last chapter. Last chapter of Matthew. It's got a name though. They call it the Great Commission. It's the Great Commission. And what it says is, and I'm going to just do this off the top of my head, which is not good, but it says right before that, it says that all power is given unto Jesus. Don't it say that? Somebody turn there right quick. Don't it say that all power is given unto Jesus? It does. Well, you think about that. All power is given unto Him. So, what does that exclude if it says all power? Power on them lights, huh? That's His power. His power made me come up here today. Power made you come. Everything that's done is done through Him. He grants us that power. Although some of us may not walk too fast, we're still going. Some of us, when we get up, our old joints might crinkle a little bit, cause a little pain, but we still go. That power is given to us. So, what did Jesus say in that, the Great Commission? He says to go ye into all the lands and proclaim that gospel, to tell people what they will not read, or have not read, or can't read, whatever the case may be, is to go out and do that. And what do we do a lot of times? Guilty. I say, you know, they're going to think bad of me if I say something about God. They'll think I'm a holy roller, or they'll think I'm this, or I'm that. And so I hesitate to do it. I think we should be bold. What point in your life are you going to take that step? Or are you going to say, I am a child of God. I know that. I've been saved since I was 12 years old. You know, the preacher says often about how his life was changed. Well, I accepted the Lord in Gordon Avenue Baptist Church when I was about 12 years old. Was I saved? Yes, I was. Did God put his hedge of protection around me? He did. And I sowed a lot of bad oats, a lot of bad things I've done, and he kept me. He kept me. He preserved me. He looked after me. Is that happening to any of y'all? Yeah, they bunch. So, it was long before I got about 50. Y'all heard me tell this. Before I decided to take that little step up. Wasn't a big step, just a little step. And I decided this. At what point in my life that I have left? We don't know how much we got left. At what point in my life that I have left am I going to step up to be pleasing to him? At what point in my life when I stand before him one day, can he look up at old Ronnie and say, well done, good and faithful servant. Have I been good? Have I been faithful? Have I been a servant? Shine that light. Shine that light. Turn it on its head. I can say this. I can look back at Sparks First Baptist Church over the past, this year's about to get over with in a few days. And I can look back at Sparks First Baptist and see where a bunch of people stepped up. A bunch of people stepped up. And COVID come along and tried to knock our feet out from under us, didn't it? And you know, we kept right on going. We kept right on going. If we couldn't do this, we made something else available. I remember great services right out beside the building. Amen. When we didn't get knocked out, we just sort of got bumped into a little bit and sort of discomforted. And we had some good services out there on the outside till it got too hot. Then things sort of changed up and we came in and we had good services here. And now it seems like COVID's had a little surge, a little comeback to us, and we had to do some other. But you know what? I'm just thankful for the folks here that not only when things was mentioned, when things come up, our FM station we got may not a soul ever take advantage of that, may not. But it's not the fault of First Baptist Church, because the way has been provided for them. Bring your tithes and offerings into the storehouse. I'm a big believer in that. I'm a big believer in, if you do that, God promised a blessing. Why not take advantage of those promises? Why not take advantage? If somebody come up and they said $300 bills on the courthouse steps, you'd be at the courthouse steps in the morning getting your money. He's told you that. He's going to bless you if you tithe and offer. You can't outdo God. It's just, how many agrees with that? Most of it. So, there's the way out. The way out is you don't have to come if you're afraid of COVID. You've got a way out there. The food ministry, hasn't that been great? Hasn't that been something? Did that open a lot of us' eyes? Yeah, it did. Would I ever thought that we would have been, things would have been done that's happened out there? I don't know how many people have made professions of faith, but several. And you know what? It's because we didn't sit idle in here. We didn't do what Eli did and sit by the post. And said, you know, Eli sat by the post. And he said, well, you boys don't act too bad. You boys sort of behave yourself, if you will. They wasn't going to, and he wasn't going to. But God gave him that chance. He could have called them boys in and said, all right, boys, y'all are priests for the Lord. You're not acting like it. You sit down. You sit down. And somebody else will take your place for a while. He didn't do that. And God pronounced that fate on him. Now, Hannah looked to God for her help, and God provided that help. Ophni and Phinehas, they sort of had head knowledge of God. They knew who he was. They'd been taught all their life who he was, but they didn't know what he did. They didn't know who God was. And God had put Eli in his position. He placed him there as a priest, as a high priest. God put him there. But did he have any fear for God? Didn't demonstrate it, did it? Now, I'm going to ask you some questions. Did you fit any of those circumstances we looked at the good and the bad and the ugly? Did you? When you shine, I'm going to look at you. I'm going to just ask you to look at yourself. And I'll ask you this. Are you fit to serve? I had to ask myself that. Are you fit to serve? No. No. You're not fit. And you can't do on your fitness. You have to go on his. Now, how can you bring about a change? How can you bring about a change in your life and in the things around you? How can you bring about a change? You go back to the good, the bad, and the ugly. You go back to the good. You look at what Hannah did. And Miss Diane, did you say prayer?
No, she did.
Thank you, Miss Sherry. That's the answer. It's prayer. Prayer is the answer. You know what? God didn't say, go down to the church, stand on the front steps, stand on one foot and hold one hand up and pray these words. He didn't ever say that, did he? He didn't give us a limitation on our prayers. We're free to speak to him wherever we are. We can do just what Hannah did. We don't even have to verbalize the words. She just opened her mouth. She just spoke with her lips. She had a silent prayer. Have them often. Don't have to be long. Lord, help this. Lord, help so-and-so. Lord, bless and be with those families that's lost loved ones this week. Lord, bless and be with those families that's suffering with COVID, those families that's suffering the effects of all this stuff. Lord, bless and be with our nation as we look to an election coming up. And can we trust the results of that election? We don't know. We haven't seen anything done to make me believe that we could. But we don't know that. We don't know what's going on. But you know what? I can be confident. I can be confident of one thing. That God is in control. Mm-hmm. He has never failed. He doesn't fail. He don't come short. He don't come short ever. So, I think I'm going to tell you one little short story and then we're going to be done. And I'm going to tell you this, and it's come to me this week. And some of you may have heard it before. If you have, I'm an old man, just bear with me. Old men tell a lot of stories 2 or 3 times, don't they? Yeah. Well, when the preacher asked me, and Linda told me don't blow my own horn. And if I blow my horn, it ain't very loud, I can promise you. He asked me to come over here from where we're sitting, and he asked me about doing this, and he says, you're a chaplain. You're a chaplain. I'm not a preacher. I am a chaplain with Georgia Baptist Disaster Relief. I've been for a pretty good while. And we were on a call out a few years ago. There was an ice storm over in Augusta, Georgia. It got cold. I'd never been through an ice storm. I know what to expect when we got over there. The trees were hung with ice, and they were breaking and falling. They were crashing on people's cars, on people's houses. It was a mess. It was a real mess. And it was a mess for, it wouldn't have been a mess for Scotty. He'd jumped out with his chainsaw and took care of everything. But it had been a mess for some of the rest of us that couldn't got up on the house. It was a mess for those that wasn't able to get out and to do. It made a mess. Storm just come through Lindsay's neighborhood. There's a lot of people out helping a lot of people there. Well, that's what Georgia Baptist Disaster Relief does. We've been out in order to be able to witness, to tell about Jesus, to tell the good news. We were over there helping people, cutting the trees off their houses and stuff. It was mine and Linda's job this particular day to go out with a book of a sheet of people that had called in desiring help. And our job was to go out there and to sort of assess their problems, to see how big a job they had. And so we came to, and Linda was doing the navigating that she usually did. This was back when we had the little Garmin or whatever it was. And we come to a Dean road. And she tells me, go straight. There ain't no go straight here. You got to go one way or the other. So finally, about 20 miles later, we went around one way, and we come up to this nice double wide there. Had a chain link fence around it. Yard just as clean as a whistle. Had one little tree, wasn't that big, out in the front yard. We pulled up. A lady come walking out. As I was driving in the driveway, I look over against the fence road, and there's a shelter. There's a tractor, nice tractor, backhoe, nice backhoe. And I'm looking around and seeing us. I don't see no damage here. I don't see, why did they call us? The lady came out and she says, I asked her, I said, where's your damage? She said, well, it's around the fence road. Well, that wasn't our job. Our job was to help people around their house, to get the limbs off their house, not clean up their yards. So, and this was about 3 acres. So she says, I said, well, we're going to have some people in the neighborhood later on, but I said, really, I can take that limb with me now. And so she says, I said, her husband would be ill with her if I went in and talked with him. I asked her about going in and talking. Don't, she said. He will be mad with me. I will catch it when you leave, was her words. He was an old Vietnam veteran. He's crusty. Okay, I won't go. So we had prayer with her in the front yard, and we left. When we got back to our church where we was all camped that night, where we were meeting, state director come up to me and he says, Ronnie, did you have anything significant happen today? And I said, no, not really. Nothing too bad happened. I said, well, we had this one guy. I said, he was just crusty, and he said, his wife told us that he'd be ugly to her if we said anything to him. And he said, what was his name? I said, I think his name was Harry. Harry was his name. I can't remember his last name, but Harry was his name. He said, can I pray for Harry tonight? I said, sure. I don't care. Pray for Harry. So that night, when we got in our debriefing, state director, who is a very, very good Baptist minister, never heard a bad sermon out of him, he prayed for Harry. He prayed a prayer that went like this: Lord, I pray that you would make Harry miserable. I pray, Lord, that everything that would come to Harry would be rotten, would be no good. Everything around Harry would just make him so miserable that he can't stand himself. And I'm sitting there listening to this prayer, and I'm thinking to myself, I wish I had never told him about Harry. I don't want no bad to come to Harry. Well, it rocked on about 6 months later, and we were meeting over at Eastman, and we took a break, a coffee break, and a lady came out, and the state director was standing up front there, and a lady came out to get some coffee, and she says, did you hear about the guy that got saved over at Augusta? And automatically, I wasn't in the conversation, I was at the other end of the table, but I knew who she was talking about. Come to find out, to make the long story a little shorter, after we had come through and left Harry, he sat there in his wheelchair in his glass door, and he looked out across the street to one of our crews that came and cleaned up the house next door, and he saw the men working and women working together, piling up that stuff, and he watched all that and put it in his head. About, I don't know, a time later, I don't know whether it's 2 weeks later or a time later, I don't know just how long it was, some of the chaplains we sent out to just go by and visit people, they had Harry's name, or they was in the neighborhood. I don't know which happened. They were in that neighborhood talking with the people, sharing the Lord, looking for an opportunity to share the Lord with them. And they walked up to Harry's door. And Harry said, come on in. I've been expecting you. Harry accepted the Lord that day. We would have never have heard about it. There was nobody there to tell the story of Harry till that happened in Eastman, Georgia, months later. months later. So, just as Hannah prayed, the prayer went up for Harry. Your prayer will be heard. God hears your prayers. He don't forget them. Sometimes we move past. Sometimes we have peace with whatever's going on in our life. But God don't forget. He don't forget that. He don't forget that good that you did. He don't forget that you're there. You're in service. You're a servant of His. And one day, if you'll do what Hannah did, if you'll do that prayer, Sherry, if you'll do that, you're going to hear Him say to you, well done, good and faithful servant. That's it, y'all. You survived it. Tommy will come. We'll have a hymn of invitation that we usually do, and y'all can get up a little early, maybe not too bad. I appreciate y'all putting up with me and everything you do, not just here, but everything around about the church and all the things. And if I stepped on your toes, I'm sorry, but I would just try to encourage everybody. Let's all get on the boat. Let's all get on the wagon. Let's go out and serve the Lord. Let's encourage one another. Let's try to be friends to the Lord. Let's be friends with Him. And let's be friendly and let people be friends with us too. Amen.
Great message, y'all. Enjoyed it. I'd like to say, in all our categories, where do we fit? Where do we fit as a church? Good, bad, or ugly? And we all have to look at our hearts. Let's turn to page 343, just as I am. Stand up and sing.
Father, I just want to thank you for the Brother Ronnie as he stepped up, Father, and brought your word, Father. Father, I pray that you would put it on our heart.